It's summer sale time again, the time of year where you browse endless amounts of games you would never normally have considered, but now they're reduced, they've enticed you in, despite the insurmountable backlog that you already have sat on your game list. I'm going to try and cover a small selection of games which are a little more unusual, as well as some of the common muck that people have been rambling on about before, and I'm going to cover it in 3 sections: cheap games I recommend, games I'm going to buy myself, and games I'll get another time. So just to be clear, only games in the first category I have actually played. The rest I'm basing it purely on speculation from a combination of trailers, blurb, and general opinions dotted around the internet. Without further ado, let's kick it off with some games that I consider to be Steam steals. 12 is Better Than 6 was actually the first game that I covered when I started doing my blunt reviews, and I would still recommend this as I had a lot of fun playing it at the time. It has some interesting mechanics and a different but cool art direction to boot. At this price it's definitely worth a shot, particularly if you like games like Hotline Miami. Battle Block Theatre is a fairly generic platformer with nothing particularly new gameplay wise, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time playing it due to its fantastic narration by Will Stamper, which kept me giggling throughout, and it's a solid game all round with nice friendly graphics. You can even play this couch co-op and throw your friends into traps along the way if you want. At least watch the trailer for this one, it's worth it. Cargo: A Quest for Gravity still stands out in my mind as probably one of the weirdest and wackiest games I've ever played. Admittedly it has been a little while, but the fact that I still remember it to this day means it did something right. You spend the majority of it trying to make weird naked dwarf creatures happy by flailing them around on your weird inventions, as the primary objective is to collect fun. Although Grow Home doesn't have shed loads of gameplay, I have to say it's probably one of the most adorable games in recent years, and one which anyone can enjoy. You're a little robot called Bud, and you're trying to collect and return seeds for research purposes, while also using the plants and wildlife to make your way back up to your spaceship. This is the kind of game which is just nice to play. I consider puzzle agent games to be some of Telltale's best work, as the story is entertaining and the humour, although quite subtle, is very much at the core of the game. The puzzles aren't ridiculous like they can be in some point-and-click games, and you can collect hints along the way if you're really struggling. I prefer this to being forced to go full walkthrough, as it can ruin the atmos of a point-and-click game. Okay, so with Horde, just think Trogdor. That's basically what this is. You can travel the land burninating all the peasants, and stealing their gold to pile it up in your nest for no apparent reason other than dragons like shiny things. It starts off very casual and you can pretty much roam around and do what you want to, but in some of the later stages you need to start working out strategies to maximise your gold, and it can be pretty absorbing. All in all, it's basically a steal. If you're looking for a puzzle game that's sort of like Match 3, but not really, and has loads of depth and content, then Todalis is probably one of your best shouts. It's absolutely packed with campaign missions, leaderboards, and you can even create your own levels if you don't have enough to play around with already. The amount of content for the price is insane, and if you like puzzle games you'd be silly not to at least give this a look in. Zombie Driver is very much a one-trick pony. If you like arcadey racing games from a top-down view and slaughtering tons of zombies, this couldn't really tick those boxes harder, but you don't really get a lot more than that. It has a full campaign as well as a race mode and continuous slaughter mode to play around with, but it's worth noting that if you own the original Zombie Driver, the HD version is virtually identical and probably not worth the upgrade. Next up, here's a few of the games that I'm actually going to be getting for myself, and potentially some of these will end up appearing in my blunt reviews in the near future. I've had my eye on Punch Club for a long while, and decided against it due to reports of very minimal gameplay. It caught my eye due to its interesting graphical style, which seems a little bit different to the other pixel art that you see in games. It seems to have a good sense of humour, and I quite like the career management side. It gives me slight flashbacks to Ready to Rumble boxing. Anyone who knows of Scorched Earth will know why Shell Shock Live looks like a cool game. It's nice to see a reimagining of such an old game with some modernisation, but not so much to lose its character. It's still in early access, but since it's a simple game, as long as the major mechanics are there, it should still be fun. GameCorp DX again tickles this career management itch a little more with what I hope is an interesting slant on current gaming climate. I'm not too concerned about the graphics, as it shouldn't affect the gameplay too much due to the nature of the genre. I've been wanting Game Dev Tycoon for a long while, but it still seems too expensive for what it is. This is a bit cheaper and sounds almost identical. Okay, so this doesn't need much more explaining to anyone that saw my opinion on 8-bit armies. I'm hoping this is just more of the same retro RTS action. However, I'm slightly disappointed the additional campaigns seem like they're all going to be DLC. In my opinion, as long as they just continued with what they were doing before, this really can't go wrong. Okay, so my justification for Castle Storm was a little bit loose. They mentioned building Lego castles and knocking them down was their inspiration for the game, and apparently that was enough for me. That, and it combines elements of tower defense with physics-based destruction, two things which I've always found fun for a little bit of mindless wind-down time, which sometimes I like to see in a game. So I like my music, and I like my rhythm-based games. I also like racing games. Well, this is all of them in one, so in theory I can't actually lose. I first added Riff Racer to my wishlist when it was in early access, and it was a little bit more expensive. I wasn't quite convinced at the time that it would be worth it, but since then it's had a price drop and a full release, so in my eyes it's a lot more viable now. Maybe I have no idea how to pronounce this, but hey, it looks atmospheric and mysterious with a soundtrack to match. There's just something I find oddly charming about the game's trailer. It didn't necessarily catch my eye, it's just given me enough to make me want to know more about it. It may just be another roguelike spacey shooter with RPG elements, but I hope there's a little more behind it. With Party Hard, it's just the concept alone that sounds great. It's the middle of the night and you want to sleep, but the neighbours are having a loud party. You must kill them all. It might be a little contentious in the current climate, but the game looks so far-fetched in what you can do that it just looks like stupid fun. A story of cowboys, resurrection and revenge, all presented with a kick-ass soundtrack. Hard West looks like a game that was just made for me. My only sticking point is that I'm not usually keen on turn-based strategy, but I think on its coolness alone I'm willing to give this one a try. So Deadbolt is a side-on action-stealth hybrid in which you play the Reaper to try and put the undead back in their graves. It looks difficult and gory from the outset. Stealth is never a strong point for me, but it does claim that guns blazing is also an option, so I should be able to use the same techniques I used in Dishonored and Wolfenstein. And last up, there are some of the games which I've got my eye on, but they didn't quite persuade me into pulling out my wallet this time around. Bombshell. So I didn't know about this game until it was practically served out on a plate, albeit without a price tag at the time, and then when it finally was released at £30, I opted to hold back a little, and after seeing some of the feedback, I'm pretty glad I did. It's come down significantly in price since then, and the trailer still screams my type of game, but ultimately, if it's considered to be subpar, I'd rather not pay top dollar for it. The Solus Project. This one, well, I'm not 100% sure why, but this one is another one which made me want to know more about it through a combination of looking graphically appealing and a shroud of mystery about it to top it off. This one didn't quite do enough to make me open my wallet, and it's still pretty new, but this is certainly one I'll be keeping my eye out for in the future. So Offworld Trading Company is by the lead designer of Civ 4, a game which still stands strong amongst the 4X games despite being several years older than all of them. This time it looks to be that the strategy element is strong, but with a much heavier focus on the economy side of things rather than the military dominance side. One of my issues is that these games often need a lot of time dedicated to fully grasp them, which I'm not sure I want to do just yet. Any game which carries the tag, like Binding of Isaac, automatically gets my attention, and Enter the Gungeon looks to me much closer to getting the gameplay side of it down, as well as a lot of the difficulty and humour elements that many others miss, which in my eyes was critical. Currently I'd still say it's a little more than I'd like to pay, and I still have Nuclear Throne to try out in my backlog, so maybe next time it'll be a different story. I'm not sure why, but Stories the Path of Destinies gives me a little bit of a Crash Bandicoot vibe, and aside from the fact that it's a third-person adventure, it doesn't seem to have much more in common with it. It's also another one which seems like it would have a good dialogue as well as a fun overall atmosphere, which ultimately is why you should play a game. I'm just not convinced that now is the time. Don't get me wrong. Ballroom looks great. It has an incredible old-school CRPG aesthetic, and it also sounds like it has a huge world with lots to do as well as some management and crafting elements. My problem is it looks like the kind of game that will take a million years to actually do anything with, and not feel like you've achieved anything. A recipe for sitting on my backlog and me thinking, maybe I'll play it next time, every single time I see it. So there you have it. Hopefully there's some games in there which you might not have heard about or saw once and completely forgot about, and perhaps some insight into what I'm looking for in my games. Do you agree with my choices? Do you want to see reviews of any of these games in particular? Bash some comments into the box and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and enjoy what's left of the sale.